I haven't had a message.
It's live.
It is live. Yeah, I've got it. Good. Okay, I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds because even though we're live, there's probably still people popping in. So just a couple of seconds. So let me kick off. I think you all know me. My name's Penny Ferguson. And the last Thursday of every month, I have a conversation with somebody amazing, somebody who I think epitomizes being a great leader. And they're all from different backgrounds. And I'm over the moon to have Jojo on this occasion. I'm trying to remember how many years. I'm not very good at time now. The older I get, the more time doesn't mean so much to me. What is it about? Is it about 3 years ago now?
4 years.
4 years, is it? Good
Yeah.
gracious. So I got introduced to you via somebody who had been through the program some years before with the Marketing Academy and thought it'd be a good idea. So I had a meeting with Jojo and Ali. And they very quickly decided that as a top team, they were all getting together, not very far ahead, that they'd go through the program. They omitted to tell us the venue. Poor Christine was delivering a program to Jojo and our top team in a yurt. And unfortunately, it happened to be a very cold night. Christine had a yurt to herself at the night. But of course, bathrooms aren't in your tent. So you have to go out to the bathroom. And she'd got overcoats, jackets, sweaters, everything on, praying that she didn't need to go to the loo in the night. So I think that was the most unusual venue where we've ever run a program. But that was the first time I met you, Jojo. And since then, we've got to know each other really well, and it's been an absolute joy working with you. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, your background, who you're now with, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. So Jojo, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Penny, very much. I'll touch on the yurt so everybody has a bit more detail on that great adventure. So yeah, so Jojo de Noronha, I am currently the president of one of the divisions for Kraft Heinz called Northern Europe, which encompasses the UK, Ireland, and Scandinavian markets. It's a business of about $1.5 billion in size. I've been at Kraft Heinz actually nearly 10 years. But I have quite a squiggly career. So I didn't start off in FMCG or CPG as some may know the industry. I actually worked in finance, started in finance advisory, and then went into private equity for almost 10 years prior to joining Kraft Heinz. Worked at Lehman Brothers, for those who still remember what they were. They were a bank that went bankrupt in 2008, and then worked for two different private equity funds after that. And then, as I said, joined Kraft Heinz. I also had a very squiggly career at Kraft Heinz. We're actually big believers in these careers that are quite function agnostic, and we believe that people's potential are more important than what they've done in the past. So with that, I actually started in sales. I then went and did HR. I was the head of HR eventually for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And then almost 5 years ago, I came into this role, which is a general management role, so CEO, president of the division I just mentioned. I've also, on the personal side, I'm originally from Brazil. Interesting, I now say originally from Brazil. I am from Brazil. Born in Brazil, raised in Brazil up until I was 18. I then left Brazil and went to university in the US, and then moved to the UK after that. A year after moving to the UK, met my husband, Nicholas, who Penny also knows, and then had two daughters, Olympia and Theodora, who are now 8 and 11 years old. I'm also, you may find me cycling, running, doing lots of sports outside of work. I'm a huge believer that, physical health leads to greater mental health. So I do a lot of that to keep myself sane and, be able to keep up with all the other things I do in life. I also sit on the board of a company called BeyondTag outside of my job at Kraft Heinz, and which is a company in the labels and RFID industry, and a global company. And then I also sit on the board, which is a non-profit board for Rise Against Hunger, which is the largest organization trying to fight hunger in the world. So yeah, lots of things, but I'm sure we'll touch upon all of them, Penny. So maybe I won't mention the yurt just now, but I will mention it later.
I have to say, some of those things that you talked about, I didn't know. And it was lovely to hear them. You really have moved around a bit and done different things. Mark, you're hearing what you do now. I'm thinking, how the heck do you fit it all into your schedule? Because I'm thinking, God, that really does sound as though you're juggling a lot of balls. So I'm really curious. First of all, what was it that inspired you? Or because you made the decision remarkably quickly. What inspired you to take yourself and the top team through our 3-day program?
Great question, Penny. I will say two things. And the first is quite simple. When you trust someone, you trust that that person makes good decisions. And I trusted my head of HR who recommended the program very much. Her name is Alessandra. She had gone through the program in the Marketing Academy, and she is herself an incredible leader, probably the most remarkable leader I have in the organization. Every team she's ever led had become a better team. People got promoted out of her team. Her team always had consistently great engagement scores. So she herself was someone I trusted and someone I saw as a fantastic leader. And if she was mentioning the program to me, I thought, you know what, I should trust Ale. However, there was a second element to it, which was when Ale said, Jojo, the great thing about the program is that this is a personal leadership program. It's a program that is tailored for the individual. It's not just for your workplace. You become a better leader to yourself, to your family, but also to your coworkers. And I believe the lines between work and life are now more blurred than ever before. And if I'm helping my team be better leaders in the workplace, I should be also helping them be better leaders in their lives as a whole. So when she mentioned that, I thought this is the perfect thing for us to embark on. My team was also fairly new as a team. So we needed something that was going to change us forever. And she said it changed her forever. So that's how we embarked on the journey. And of course, I decided to go to a yurt because I also believe that sometimes putting your team into these types of situations levels the playing field. And I decided to take them on a camping trip. And yes, we were in yurts. And it was a little bit of a struggle. It was probably 2-3 degrees at night. We had not just to sleep in the yurt, but also to train in the yurt. But I think if I would go back in time, I would probably do it all over again because it did level the playing field. And I think the moment Christine started talking, she had all eyes and ears on her. And I think that's typically quite hard to do when you're in an environment that you come into it every day. So I think the yurt allowed us all to be very focused on what we were doing in the moment.
Yeah, it is an experience. I remember coming to visit you the next morning. I think I joined you for breakfast, standing outside. I can't remember what it was, not quite a hamburger, but a bacon roll or something. But I remember coming to meet you all, which was a bit special. There's one word that you said a couple of times, and I really am curious to know how you go about it. I have a fundamental belief that you're never, ever going to have a successful team until you have trust. An awful lot of the people that I work with, and when I start working with them, I see a group of people coming into the room and they believe they're a team. And in my opinion, they're not. They're a group of individuals who work together, but they're not a team, which means that actually the trust isn't there. And when we do the first exercise on the program, you can immediately see that actually that wasn't there before, and suddenly there's an opportunity. How have you gone about building trust in a team? Because I've seen your teams and they are amazing always. You seem to be able to pull people together in a way that, in my opinion, is pretty unusual in a CEO.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for that, Penny. I will say behind the mask, which is the first exercise we do in the Living Leader, is the most powerful exercise I've ever come across. And maybe Penny won't like this, but I actually do behind the mask more often than not, even without the program. Because, well, actually, my whole leadership team is trained on the Living Leader. But I got a few new members recently, and I ran Behind the Mask just 2 weeks ago in our offsite. But it is the most powerful exercise, because you cannot build trust if you don't understand the individual that is behind the person working for you. And Behind the Mask allows us all to tell our stories. Of course, it starts with the person who is leading that team, or typically that's what we do to encourage everybody else to open up. But what I always felt is that Behind the Mask reveals things about people that it is very difficult to do in any other environment. And the moment you start realizing that everybody is battling a battle that you know nothing about, empathy starts building up, and therefore trust starts building up.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of explaining it. I'm really curious, and you will know a lot of people in other organizations. Why do you think it is that almost no organizations do this? Why do you think it is? What is it? There seems to be a fear about people. They don't want to expose who they are as the real person. Why do you think it is?
I think there are two things, Penny. One is potentially even a cultural norm that was set up in the corporate world, probably, 80s, 70s, that kind of stuck around, which is this division between who you are as a person in your personal life and who you are at work. And this idea that, by bringing yourself to work and being vulnerable, you're less of a leader, you're less powerful. You can instill less rules, which is clearly something we've all come to realize and learn that it's not the case. That actually quite the opposite is the case. But I think that there is a bit of a cultural norm still in the corporate world. But I think the second is just a fear of being found. I think most people are fearful of revealing themselves, and again, linked to that, lowering their ability to lead a team. So yeah, I don't think I can find a better explanation than that. Everyone that goes through the exercise of Behind the Mask, or even simply being vulnerable in the workplace, realize that people connect better to them, and therefore their leadership is way more impactful. That followership follows after that, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I'd be really interested, because just hearing you talk, I don't know how much we actually added to what you already had, because to me, when I first met you, you already were a leader. Nearly always as you know, I don't deliver programs now. I decided I'd done my stint. That's my bit. I've done enough, so I don't do it. But I know that when I ran programs, and probably for the last 5 years, really the only programs I ran were for very, very senior, big, corporate teams. And asking the question at the beginning, how many of you think you're more towards being a leader, and how many more towards a manager? And the more senior they were, the more they were inclined to say, I'm a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, and I know that the minute you measure the communicating behavior, it becomes very clear they're not leaders at all. They may be leaders in their heart. What's coming out of their mouth is straightforward management. You know the definition we use, which is really, really simple. I'd be curious to know, when do you think, because it was way before I came on the scene, when do you think you really began to understand the difference and how important it was to be a leader more than a manager?
Yeah, I would just say, Penny, that I don't think that I was a leader before I ran the program. Maybe I had a few elements in me that I think allowed myself to speed up the learning curve around what the living leader could bring. But I am exponentially better, and I can say that 10 times after doing the living leader, and I'll mention why. But there was a moment before the living leader in which I realized the importance of vulnerability. We don't necessarily use the word vulnerability as much in the living leader, but vulnerability is the living leader is all about vulnerability if you think about it.
Yeah.
And it was when I read a book called Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard the book, but that book, I would say I have a career prior to Dare to Lead and a career post Dare to Lead. And then I have a leadership post the living leader and a leadership pre the living leader. Those are the kind of two defining moments in my career. Because Dare to Lead gave me the permission to be vulnerable and understand that that wasn't a weakness, that I could use that as a strength. One of the things I didn't mention in the story when I first told is I was given this opportunity to run this very large business. It's the second largest cash contributor to all of Kraft Heinz, which is a 40 billion market cap company, before ever having had any general management experience. I cried the day I was given the role because I just didn't know what to do with it. I thought, how are they giving me this role? I don't know anything about running a business. I've learned a few elements, but I've never run a business, and they're giving me the second largest business. How can that be possible? And I had already read Dare to Lead, and I had a great coach at the time. And she said something to me that really stuck. She said, make your journey public. And by that, she meant allow people to understand the fears you're going through.
Right.
And that really stuck with me. Because having read Dare to Lead and giving myself the permission to be vulnerable, and then hearing that, I thought, you know what, that could be my superpower. And I did that from the start. And I can tell you, it was very scary because I knew nothing. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I'd be sitting in meetings and feeling, how am I ever going to lead this business? But I probably allowed more people to be themselves and give their opinion and help me run this business when I didn't know what I was doing quicker than others. So that was the first moment in my career. The second was, as I said, the living leader. And the reason I said I don't think I was a leader before is because there were probably 3 elements to my leadership that I just didn't know were so powerful. The first was listening and the power of listening. Being vulnerable doesn't necessarily mean you're listening. So those 2 things are not necessarily correlated. I understood the power of listening in the living leader. And I can tell you, listening is the most tiring thing you can do, but it's also the most powerful thing you can do. The second was appreciation. I appreciated, but I didn't know that just consistent appreciation could be so powerful. And so I don't go a day without appreciating. And then the third was deep. And if you haven't done the living leader training, maybe you won't understand this as much, but empowering question. So allowing people or helping people to eliminate their limiting beliefs, and enabling people to take the next step in whatever they're doing. So those 3 things to me, and there are obviously many other elements to the program, but those 3 things to me were very, very life-changing. And I use them with my children the entire time too. So they didn't just change my life at work. They really did change my relationship with my children. And actually, I have an oldest daughter who is amazing at empowering questions herself.
I love that. Gosh, I just do need to say one thing I probably needed to say at the beginning and forgot, because I think what you're saying is all so powerful. For anybody who's listening, if you have questions that because I'm doing all the asking of questions of you, if there's anybody who thinks, oh, I'd love to know more about that, please put it up. I'll probably have to get my specs out to read it, but that's okay. But please put it up, because Jojo will be delighted to answer any of them. Jojo, you said something that I think so many people probably wouldn't recognize, and it might surprise them. And that's when you said listening is absolutely exhausting. It's really, if somebody told me before I first designed the program that I was a good listener, I'd have said I'm really good. I'm always getting people coming to me with their problems. I was a hopeless listener. All that was going on in my head was, how can I help them? What advice can I give them? What is it that I can tell them to do so that it'll be better? All out of me, rather than really listening and helping them think for themselves. It's very scary. And I think what's even more scary with listening is when it's somebody who's very close to you and the route their thinking paths are going down are not the routes that you would have chosen. And then you have to just sit there and think, okay, that's what's right for them, and be able to completely let that go. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. Have you got any examples of when you've really had to listen and you found it really hard, but you've seen the payback?
I think I can think of a recent example. Actually, just yesterday, I was in the train. I was actually in Brazil last weekend, and it sounds crazy, but my brother got married, so I went to Brazil for the weekend. And I saw a very good friend of mine. And I want to give this example because I don't want to just stick to the power of leadership at work. I want to also hopefully make people understand how powerful this could be in your personal life. I saw a friend of mine over the weekend, very good old friend of mine from childhood. And something in me, I just had a gut feeling that he wasn't all right. I saw him first silently because I saw him on passing at a lunch with his father, and his semblance didn't look great. And then I saw him at the wedding, and he was quite introspective, didn't speak much. And so yesterday I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna call him and ask him if everything is all right. And it took him a while to tell me that he wasn't all right. Lots of questions, and then he finally said, "You know what? Things are not great at work, and they haven't been great for a while." And I said to him, "Tell me why." And he went on for probably about 20 minutes. This is somebody who's got his own company. This is somebody who is surrounded by coaches, has a therapist, has a fantastic wife. And at the end of that 20 minutes, he said to me, "I've never had so much clarity about what I'm going to do next." And I didn't do anything. All I did was listen for 20 minutes. I was exhausted when I got home. And then my husband wanted to speak to me, and I didn't have more listening ears. But listening allows people to process and create clarity for them. But we always think the opposite. We always think that if you're speaking to someone, you're there to give them clarity. But we never have the answer. They always have the answer. And actually, once they give themselves the answer actually sticks rather than, the opposite, which is typically what happens when you try and give people advice of what they should do.
That is a really powerful example. And as you say, it's great to be able to give one that isn't in the workplace.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you about appreciation, but I have glasses on. A question's come in from Maurice. Okay. Just so that you know, Maurice, he's actually also a wonderful trainer. He used to report to Paul Stobart. He was a director at Sage. And when he left, he's become a trainer, and he delivers programs all over the world. He has his own very successful business. He's a coach. He's a mentor. He's a mindfulness coach, all sorts of things. And so he's asked this question. Jojo, on the topic of trust, how do you ensure that there is high levels of trust on your team? And how do you keep the levels of trust high?
Yeah, great question, Maurice. First, trust to me is exactly like every single other muscle in our body. If it's not exercised, it doesn't exist. So I really believe that trust is only going to happen if you get to know the human behind the professional. So I will very often, and actually with a regular cadence, I will take my team out of the regular workplace and the regular working environment and get the team to connect on a human level. I will typically, build up or set up an environment that allows that to happen. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, as I said, we have a very good business in Sweden. We rented a little house in the archipelago of Sweden. I took my entire team there. Why were we there? Similar reasons as to what I said around the yurt. Level playing field. Everyone is in the same place. There's no, more power, less power between individuals. Everyone has the same type of bed. Everyone's having the same food. We're all in the same environment. And obviously that, allows everybody to connect at a different level than when we're in the workplace. A simpler way to do it: get the team out of the office and take the team out for a meal. As simple as that. Or go and play a game outside. I'm a huge believer that, as I said, physical health allows better mental health. So I will often take my team either rowing, we have a running club in the office. All these things get people to meet each other at a human level. And once you get to know the individual, the human behind the professional, higher levels of trust are built. Now, I think the first question you asked, Maurice, was how do I ensure trust is in the team? I wish I had a thermometer of trust that I could give you, and it will give you the data, but that doesn't exist. It does need to come from your observations and your team's observations too. So I always start every appraisal I have with my team members. I had one yesterday with 2 questions. What is worrying you and what is energizing you? I ask what is worrying you because typically I will get a hint as to any conflicts that are happening in the team. Energizing is because I believe that a positive mindset leads to a better conversation. Actually, that's something that Nancy Klein mentions in her book as well. I also observe conflicts that are happening in the meeting room, and whether these conflicts we're able to resolve them within that environment. I will also observe and have a good pair of listening ears around people telling me about conflicts that are happening within the team or asking me for help in resolving conflict. If that's happening, clearly the levels of trust are not high in the team, because if they are, the team will communicate with one another and I don't have to be the one resolving between team members. So those are the things I will typically observe. And I think a great example of when we failed to get to know the human behind the professional was COVID. COVID really increased the levels of conflict in my team, and trust was very low at the time because we couldn't see each other. We couldn't spend time outside of the workplace. We tried very hard through the digital spaces, and I think that's possible, but it's much harder. So yeah, that's what I do.
So we've had another follow-on question from that. Hi, Jojo, from Hannah Sanders. Hi, Jojo. Are there any regular habits or activities you do together as a team to practice what you have learned on the program?
Yeah, great question. My whole team, as I said, is trained. Now I'm thinking, with the exception of one person who couldn't do the training recently, who I had just hired into the team. So the language of the training is something that I find very powerful, to have a common language. And we have a common language. So if one says empowering question, the other knows what that means. Appreciation is not is the norm, is not something that only one person does. So how do we keep the habits there? I think first is make sure your whole team is trained, because it is very difficult for a team to operate as a team and be a better team, a high-performing team, if we don't get a common language in place. And I think the Living Leader allows us to do that. We then will often nudge each other around elements of appreciation, listening, empowering questions, limiting beliefs when we're together or when we have events with the rest of the team. One example I gave to Penny recently was, and I don't know if Penny, maybe I can mention this now, but we had our convention. We have an annual convention that we run every year around the same time, so June. We just had ours 2 weeks ago as well. And we did an appreciation exercise with 300 people. And one may think that's not possible, Jojo. And I actually didn't know how it was going to work, but we decided to give it a try as a team. And at the end of our convention, we handed out pieces of paper, yes, regular paper, no computers, and a pen to every single person in the audience. And we asked them to think of one person that they would like to appreciate and what they would like to appreciate that person about or on. And I encourage people to appreciate someone in the audience, but of course it wasn't, strictly the rule. But it just so happened that every single one of the 300 people appreciated somebody in the audience. And I gave them 10 minutes to write on a piece of paper and then hand over the appreciation letter, put a music, put some song to play. And I didn't know what was going to happen. So I was on stage waiting for these 300 people. It was quite awkward, thinking, gosh, this can go really wrong or really well. And to my big, big surprise, it was probably the most powerful thing we've ever done. The amount of hugs, tears, smiles I saw in the audience, and the feedback we received after from the feedback form was that it was the most powerful thing they did in that day. So if they didn't understand the power of appreciation, then I don't think they will ever do. So we keep it alive in those ways. Yeah.
There's one thing I think that probably wasn't made quite clear at the beginning, is that you haven't just done the 3-day program. You have been through the 10-day masterclass. You have trained as a trainer. You've delivered programs. 3 of your top team also trained as trainers and have delivered programs. And you've just taken another 5 people through. I don't know, any of them on your top team?
Yes. Tanya is in my top team and David is in my top team.
So that is very unusual of itself. But that more than anything is going to help you keep aligned. How important do you think it was that you did that further training? Because it's a massive amount of time. And for a CEO and all of those top team to take time out to do it. First of all, why did you choose to? And how important do you think it was?
I mean, I don't think I realized that the best way to learn was to teach until I did the program and had to deliver the program. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, more than getting this job, was delivering my first program. And I was delivering to my own people. And I run the business. I mean, I'm the president, CEO of this business. And there I was standing with my little notes, delivering the training I had a team of 8 in my first cohort, all levels from all parts of the business, lots of people from Sweden, our Nordics business, some people from the UK, somebody from the factory, the person who led the factory at the time, our biggest canning factory. Actually, it's the biggest canning factory in Europe. So it was very scary, but it was very important for me to then walk the talk even more. As I said, there's nothing more powerful than having to teach something for you to learn it. But also, when you have to teach, you have to give the example. So there's no way I can walk into a room and teach people how to be great leaders if I'm not trying myself to be. Now, the caveat to that is, and I say this to my top team all the time, my team who's going through the program, do not try and be perfect. And I say this to people when I'm delivering. Don't look at me as your trainer and think, oh, but Jojo didn't do this the other day. I am human and I make mistakes all the time, every day. The fact that I'm delivering the program doesn't mean I'm a perfect leader either. But it increases the likelihood that I will portray the right behaviors, I guess. Yeah.
It's absolutely true. You don't realize until you teach it. Even I never counted, but I must have run thousands of programs. And so often I'd come out of my own program and I'd say, Pen, that was a question. You answered that question that you got asked very well, but bloody hell, not sure how well you're doing it at the moment. So it was a constant reminder. Hang on a minute. You've been forgetting to think about this. You've been forgetting to think about gratitude. You've been forgetting to think about appreciation, or you've been, or not enough, or missing opportunities. So it's absolutely right that teaching it is the best way to learn. Let me just see. We've had another question. Okay. Judith. Oh, Judith. Hello. How are you? Any thoughts on how to ensure one senior leader talks less to allow others to participate more? And I'm going to just add something here. I think it's a really good question to answer, but I think also it's worth considering answering it if the person who talks too much is more senior than you are.
How to ensure one senior leader talks less. I mean, as I said, I don't think I realized the power of listening until I did the program. So do the program. That's the first thing I would say. But if you don't do the program, I mean, first of all, give the feedback. If you want a better organization, start with yourself and give the feedback to that person. I don't think leaders realize, no leader sits there, or very rarely will a leader sit there and say, I'm going to do this because I know it's bad. They're all sitting there thinking they're doing the best job they can do. So until they hear the impact that they have on others, they are not going to be inclined to change, because those individuals got to that high place doing what they're doing. So until they hear, I don't think that they will realize. So I would very simply say, give the feedback. There's a great, I will mention another book, Penny, just because I think it's another way of saying that the power of listening is of great value. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is a book by Marshall Goldsmith, who is a coach, a well-known coach globally. And there's a great thing he mentioned on the book, which is adding too much value is one of the negative traits of CEOs. And that's it, is they get to that point, or we get to this point, and we think, well, what got us here is what we know. What
Yeah.
got us here is the value that we add. Well, guess what?
Can you give the title again so that Vic can put it up and other people can see it?
Yeah, what got you here won't get you there. Yeah. So you think, well, what got me here is all I know, what got me here were my great ideas. Well, guess what? What will get you there is not going to be your great ideas. It's going to be everybody else's great ideas. So if you don't allow your teams to talk and add their value, you won't get there.
It's really funny. You bring back to my memory one of my Thursday conversations I had with Paul Stobart, and he's so funny the way he talks about it. He said, I thought I was a brilliant communicator. Brilliant. He said, most people didn't understand what I was talking about. It's just the way he describes it. He said, until I learned. He's another CEO who decided to become a trainer.
Yeah.
And he's somebody like you, absolutely committed to walking the talk in every way possible. So it's true. The thing is that people are nervous of giving feedback. I can be very facetious about it and just say, Judith, tell them to go on the program, because that will give them the wake-up call. But people, by and large, are not good at giving feedback. It scares them.
Yeah.
They're worried what people are going to think of them. They're worried about whether, job security. There's all sorts of stuff goes on. So, in fact, that's one thing that it's worth recognizing, how you can bring in an empowering question. There was one of the top teams I was working with one day, and one of the directors had smoke coming out of every orifice, because one of the, not in a different division, but the legal had sent out an email to everybody in the company that had just caused a rumpus, because she knew nothing about this going out. People asking questions, people saying what this about. And she was very cross. And so she went in to talk to her with smoke coming out of every orifice. Probably didn't handle it quite as well as she could. And recognizing that people, by and large, do not like to be criticized. Your inclination is to feel defensive. That's where you can use a really powerful, incisive question. So you might choose to go in and say, if you knew that email you sent out caused real problems for me and a lot of my top team, how would you feel about that? So you're getting it through, but not in a way that's telling them they're wrong. It's asking them to think about, if you knew that it had. So what it's doing is handing the responsibility. How do you deal with it over to them? So that's a really good way of giving feedback, with a question.
I agree.
So,
I agree completely,
yeah.
Penny. And I mean, for leaders on the line as well, is just remember, that it is also equally important, and something we say a lot in the program, to go back and follow up on the feedback that you've received, so that you can encourage the feedback to keep coming.
You can tell I've just put my glasses on. We've had another question. Okay. Great discussion. Jojo, when so often the expectation is leaders are super confident, have you any advice how those leaders that show vulnerability can best manage this with their board and shareholders so it is seen as a positive, not a weakness? That's a hell of a question, that is.
That's a hell of a question, and the person didn't, it's a LinkedIn user, but wow. Let me tell you, as a woman in the corporate world, that is very tricky. You need to be smart about when you're going to be showcasing vulnerability. Board shareholders, what are they looking for? They're looking for, they have the least amount of information, right? They only will hear you in board meetings, and shareholders will hear you in investor calls or things like that. I think you need to very, very wisely choose the moment you show vulnerability and the moment you showcase confidence. But you know what? Let me give an example of somebody who I think showed vulnerability, but equally instilled confidence. And she told me that story because I was part of a program here at Kraft Heinz where she came to speak. So I think it's actually possible to do both things at the same time, which was Condoleezza Rice. She came to speak to us. She was the Secretary of State during 9/11 in the US. And she was telling us about, and we were very lucky to have her. I don't think this is very common, so I don't speak a bit about it not thinking that this was obviously a very big deal. But she came to tell us about that moment, and how she was both able to be vulnerable and allow her team to speak, but as well as instill confidence. And she said, 9/11 happened and none of us had the answer of what to do. It was the first time in history that something like that, to that extent, had happened. And I had my entire team there waiting for me to give them the answers, but I had none of the answers. But I felt like I needed to at least instill confidence that I was there with them, that I was going to go through whatever we had to go through by their side. And so there were two things that she did. One was how she looked. Her semblance was very important to the team. So she said, I made sure I combed my hair, I took my shower, I dressed up, I went into the meeting room looking like I was put together. And this may sound small, but people read into everything. And the second thing was calmness in my voice, calmness in my demeanor. So she showcased confidence, but she also showcased vulnerability because she didn't come into the meeting telling the team what to do. She came into the meeting asking the team what should be done. So whilst I said, choose the moment, I think that you can showcase both things at the same time. I just did a board presentation about 2 months ago to my whole Kraft Heinz global board. So not the internal board, our independent board. Well, it's a mix of independent and non. And there were plenty of questions to which I didn't know the answer. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the answer will come with time. And I was still exploring the roots. And I had absolutely zero problem in showcasing that I was exploring the roots. But I answered the roots that were possible with confidence. So I think you can showcase both things at the same time. I don't know if I'm answering your question because I think it is a complicated question. But I guess what I am trying to say is that I think vulnerability doesn't mean you can't instill confidence. I think vulnerability can also instill confidence because seeing who you truly are also, I think, shows integrity. And integrity can also give confidence, high levels of confidence. I don't
Well,
know, Penny, if you have anything to add on
no,
that.
I mean, I think it's a hell of a question, and I think you've answered incredibly well. You know, I've shared this story before, so forgive me for those of you who've heard it. But one of the things when I sort of more or less first started the company, I hadn't been going for very long, probably no more than about 18 months, 2 years, and I got asked to go and speak at an event. It wasn't a huge speaking engagement, it was about 150 people, something like that. And they were mainly men and it was mainly IT people. But what they asked me to speak about was responsibility. Now, you know that when I speak about responsibility, I share about me. I share about where I screwed up. I share about where I get it wrong. So I'm very open, utterly vulnerable in every way, saying, this is who I am. This is how I learned it by making these mistakes. And then guess what? I made the same mistake again. And, so really very open. And there were some of the people sitting there who were sort of hanging on every word. There were others who were going, oh God. And you could see them thinking, too much information. We don't need all this stuff, for goodness sake. And the feedback at the end was exactly that. It ranged from amazing, and other people saying we didn't need all that personal stuff. It was too personal. And I had to think about it. And I thought about it for about a month. I had to really think about it and think, okay, do I want to be, and I know this isn't the right terminology, so forgive me. Do I want to be a bog standard consultant that tells you everything I've learned and everything about what to do, but not tell you who I am and the real pain I've been through to learn it, being very vulnerable and open? Which do I want to be? Do I want to be me? Do I want to be authentic, which demonstrates vulnerability, or do I want to go the other route? And honest to God, it must have been about a month really thinking about it. And I'd swing from the pendulum, go from one way, oh no, I can't. If I'm going to have lots of people who don't want to hear the personal stuff. And I really had to go through angst thinking about it. And I came out the other side and said, no, it's more important to me that I'm authentic. And I just need to accept that some people who won't be right working with me, they won't be comfortable working with me, but I need to be who I am.
Yeah.
And so I think that's even true in these circumstances. You're going to need to ask yourself, do you want to be you? Do you want to be utterly authentic? What is most important to you? Because
Yeah,
otherwise it's the mask again, isn't it?
it is. And I guess what I was just thinking about is confidence and vulnerability are not mutually exclusive.
No.
You can easily have both, because what confidence are you trying to instill? The confidence that you know the answer, or the confidence that things will work out?
Yeah.
And I think they are two different things. So in that board meeting, I wasn't trying to instill confidence by answering all the questions that they had. I was trying to instill confidence in the fact that I was going to lead the team through whatever happened. So I do think that they are two different things. And often people associate confidence with just knowing all the answers. And I
Yeah.
think it brings us back to, especially as CEOs, you are not here. In fact, you know the least amount of answers. And the more you go up, the higher you go up, the less information that you have, the least amount of answers you have. And you need to realize that. You're not here to instill confidence through your answers. You're here to instill confidence through leading the team.
I think that needs to go. I think that needs to be printed out in capital letters. It's absolutely right. Why is it? Why is it that when we get promoted to a more senior role, we suddenly get this feeling that we have to have all the answers? Because that is what happens. So it's like when people are, let's say you've got a really good salesperson and they go home on a Friday as a salesperson and they come back on Monday as a manager. And there's meant to have been some sort of instant osmosis over the weekend that teaches them the skill set. But so many people then feel the pressure that they're expected to have all the answers. Why?
Well, I think it's often because they believe that that's what got them there. I think there are 2 points in your career: when you become a manager and when you become and not in the, I'm not saying this in the definition of the leading leader, but think
Yeah.
about manager as the first time you manage an individual, and leader, obviously, a wider responsibility. and I see this often, when people become managers of an individual, those who don't succeed are those who cannot stop doing the work.
Yeah.
They don't understand that from that point onwards, they need to try and influence somebody else to do the work. And the people who don't succeed as a leader are the ones who don't make that further step, which is you no longer have any of the answers. You're here to support and allow your team to come up with the answers themselves. Yeah.
Jojo, this is absolute magic, this conversation. I'm loving every bit of it. I want to just step away from the workplace for a moment, because you've said it, that's part of the reason that made you want to do the program in the first place. What impact has it had on your relationship? All your relationships, but especially your ones with Nico?
I mean, as I said, I think the two most powerful things in the home for me were listening and appreciation. Especially with someone like my husband, who Penny knows him very well, doesn't easily talk about what he's feeling or what he's going through. Really listening and really allowing him the time to process himself, his own thoughts, was something that's changed our relationship forever. Especially because when we got together easily, people can define you in those ways. We simplify humans very easily, right? Oh, Jojo is the talker and Nico is the listener. Well, guess what? That wasn't a great dynamic. So it's changed our relationship forever. And I think Nico then eventually did the program himself. So don't worry, we don't both sit there in silence trying to listen to each other, because that can happen with two living leaders. It's like, okay, now I listen too, and then you're in silence. No. I think we've learned when we need to listen and when we can talk. And I think with my girls, appreciation, I mean, we often will do appreciation exercises at dinner, or especially when we're on trips. We'll say, can we say what we'll either do it so around the table, appreciate something to the person next to you, or I've also done choose somebody in the family to appreciate. The only thing with that is, I remember one time I asked the girls to do it. Well, we asked everybody to do it, and both girls appreciated the dad, and I just felt very sad on that night. I was like, oh, they've got nothing to appreciate about me. So then we changed it, and we decided to do it the person next to you. This way, everybody gets an appreciation. But yeah, it's really changed. It's also changed my relationship with my friends. I gave the example of my friend who I talked to just recently. Empowering questions with my girls as well. I think, I'll remember, it's a really simple example to everyone on the line, but my eldest daughter was petrified about going on just school trips and things like that. And, I started using empowering questions with her. First I asked, what's the worst that can happen? And then I said, if there was one thing you could do to make yourself feel better about this trip, and that you knew you had all the freedom to take that decision yourself. She said, if I could call you every night, it would make the trip better. And so, it allowed her to understand that she had, some power in that decision and in that event. And she went on the trip, and it was all great. So we use it all the time with the girls, especially empowering questions and appreciation.
It's interesting because they're very young. I wonder how much impact this is going to have when they get older and when they start going to work, and the impact it'll have, and how they are with their friends, if they're different with their friends because of it.
Yeah, interesting you say that. Olympia got, she's an incredibly kind girl, but obviously if you've done beliefs and behaviors, you understand that, how is she kind? And I think she's kind because she listens. In fact, there's a great story on Olympia, and it happened after both Nick and I did the Living Leader. So I wonder how much she got from both of us. There was a girl in her class who I think was going through some struggles at home, and she had a few just panic attacks at school. I don't know. I'm not using the psychiatric definition of panic attacks. I don't know exactly how it was, but she just had some events at school, and so the teacher asked Olympia every single morning to take her friend out of the classroom and go for a walk around the school before the school started. So she was chosen to do that. And I always wonder, is it because she's become a better listener? And so the school asked her to do it. My dream is actually for her school to do the Living Leader, because I think it would be incredibly powerful in the school place as well. But definitely it's influenced my girls.
Well, we've got an invite-only program coming up in September. Perhaps you better get the head teacher to see if, the invite-only one is the only program that we do twice a year that is free. So maybe you better get the head teacher.
Maybe I convince him. I've tried. Let's see if I can try a second time.
Yeah, that'd be good. We've only got 5 minutes left. So what I'd like to say to you, Jojo, to me, you're an example of an absolutely amazing leader. If there's one or two nuggets that you could give people to take away that could positively impact their lives, what do you think it would be?
Penny, I am going to sound repetitive, but I'm going to give one, just because the second one is harder to do. But I will give appreciation. And I say appreciation because I think appreciation also can turn into gratitude. And gratitude is another thing we speak a lot about it in the Living Leader. Is if there's one thing you can do after listening to this today, is go and appreciate somebody in your life. We do this exercise after day 1 of the Living Leader, and it is transformative. Go and appreciate someone about something that they've done, and you will see the impact that you have, and the impact that it will have on you when you hear their reaction. It's simple to do, and as Penny always likes to say, common knowledge but not common practice. So if people can take away that one thing, which is the power of appreciation, I would say do that.
And I think you're right. I think it can have a profound impact. I think the most important thing is to recognize it's not just about saying good job. Who did a good job there? It's what is it they've done well? What is it about them? Not just, oh, you did a good report. The way you took care and attention and really thought about how you're going to write, that's about the individual. So it's about just thinking, we're all of us are so inclined. I don't know where we get it from. I think it's probably actually from school. I think teachers, it doesn't matter what they're marking. They mark papers, they mark everything, and they give you things. And when they give it back, the thing they're most likely to put attention on is what you've done badly and tell you how you can do it better next time. Rather than saying, well, this was really good, that was amazing, the attention you gave here, what you did. But what they do is say, right, you got that bit wrong and this bit. And we're very inclined to look for what's wrong. And it's the good old sentence, be careful what you look for, because you might just find it. And if you look for what's wrong in people or what they're doing badly, you'll find it. Educating yourself into each and every day, saying, can I look for something good in that person and tell them? The impact you can have is beyond anything.
Beyond anything. I could not agree more. We talked about trust actually at the start. Yeah. Appreciation yields trust.
You really believe that that's been part of what's helped you build trust, do you?
100%. 100%. 100%. But it needs to be appreciation about something, because it won't build trust if it's appreciation for the sake of appreciation. It needs to be exactly what you said, Penny. If you appreciate something specific, people feel like you're paying attention to what they're doing, and that builds trust.
And also it's about the individual, which makes it personal. It's not just about job, it makes it personal. So Jojo, can you believe an hour has gone?
No, I can't actually.
I want to say thank you so much. I think this has been one of the best conversations I've had. I
Oh.
think that it's been absolutely inspirational. You come across just so incredibly well. I think there's a lot of people in here who think, God, I wish I had a boss like that. I think it's amazing. And I've seen and I've met so many people that you've worked with. I just need to ask you a question. When are you going to deliver your next program?
I knew you were gonna ask that. I have more trainers now in my team. I basically trained everybody so that I don't have to train as often as Penny asks me.
So,
Because, yeah, for those who are trained as trainers, it's a hell of an investment, but nothing is more rewarding than training. So, yeah, I'm going to train my next cohort in September.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And when's Nico going to train his?
Well, we have to ask him, Penny.
Jojo, thank you so much. And please, everybody who's been listening, please go into LinkedIn, put on feedback. If you have more questions for Jojo, put them up or send them to Katie. We will make sure that Jojo gets them. And if there's any other bits of wisdom that you want to ask her to share, just ask her. I'm sure she will. Jojo,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, thank you, Penny. Thank you for changing my life through the Living Leader. It's been, as I said, very, very transformational for myself and my team and my family. So thank you to you.
Big pleasure.
Yes. Bye, everyone.